I just spent several days with my brother, his wife, and my little niece and nephew. And at 3 and 1 years old, as you parents know, those little ones are quite the handful. And I admit that I kind of enjoyed watching the chaos unfold every night as they entered into the routine of dinner, bath, and bedtime. And one thing that struck me again and again, you can ask my brother and his wife how much I commented on it. What struck me was how much these little ones are like little bundles of desires and demands. Fruit snacks, toys, that TV show, corn dogs instead of green beans. My adorable little godchildren were almost constantly demanding things from their parents and their Uncle Alex. But they handled it like pros, granting the right demands and refusing the wrong ones, negotiating here and there, even teaching the 3-year-old about managing emotions. Still, it's a fitting lesson for all of us in light of what we're given by the church today. What does it mean to pray? There are many kinds of prayer, but today is especially focused on intercession, asking God for the things we want, like my little niece and nephew. And if you consider it, the way that little children act is kind of the way God tells us to ask him things. Ask boldly, repeatedly, shamelessly. Really, that line about the friend who gives what he needs because of his persistence could also be translated as because of his shamelessness. I don't care that it's midnight, I need the bread, give it to me. I'll never forget when a friend of mine confided to me that they were worried that their prayers were annoying God. And I almost laughed and responded, good, that's what he tells us to do. He gives us multiple parables where a person gets what they want because they annoy the person they're asking so much that they give in. And then he tells us, do that to your Father. So annoyed as we are at our own children's persistence, we should be emboldened to do the same thing to God. By the same token, however, we must also remember this when it comes to unanswered prayer. Just as my brother and his wife decide not to give endless fruit snacks and Capri Suns to their kid right before bed, because it's actually bad for them, even though it may lead to a screaming fit, so God does often not give us what we ask, because it's not best. And that sounds simple, but it rarely feels like a satisfying answer in the midst of our struggle. So it helps to remember that just as toddlers cannot possibly understand the importance of good habits and healthy diet, so we often do not understand the value of trial and the true meaning of spiritual growth. An adult's understanding is way beyond a child's, so that what we say and do often doesn't make sense to a child. God's understanding is infinitely more beyond ours, so that his plan often doesn't make sense to us. Nonetheless, it's true that a child can also grow to understand. We, with the help of grace, can grow to understand, or at the very least, to trust, even when we don't. I don't say this as someone who's got it all figured out. I have a number of ongoing conversations with the Lord, more like complaints and arguments, really, about prayers he's been holding back on, answers I want but haven't gotten. I often don't get it. But what am I going to do? Ignore him and do it my way? I've seen how that ends. Pitch a fit until God gives in. Well, sure, why not? I sometimes do that, and every now and then it works. Just like sometimes my niece got what she wanted because she wouldn't give up asking. And just like this man in the parable Jesus gives us gets bread because he won't stop knocking. And when that doesn't work, what then? We grow. The desire that we express, it deepens or it fades or it changes. Our motivation grows or weakens or changes direction. So long as we do not simply turn away from God altogether, we grow either way. We like to think of prayer as something that's trying to change God's mind about something, but the reality is that God uses prayer, answered and unanswered, to change us. Abraham, in the first reading, begs God for mercy on Sodom and Gomorrah, and he seems to get a promise out of God. We know how the story ends, however. He can't find 10 righteous people, and the city is destroyed. Some people like to say Abraham should not have stopped asking, that he should have pushed for 5 or even 1, and that if he had, the city would have been saved. Maybe, maybe not. We don't have any information on what would have happened. We know what did happen. Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. And for the rest of history, and even by Jesus Christ himself, they are used as an example to warn us about the dangers of sin. So what about Abraham's prayer? His faith? How does he grow through this? How is God destroying a city after promising mercy a sign of his God's goodness? Look closer. Listen with faith. Why did Abraham want the city to be spared in the first place? Because he loved Sodom and Gomorrah? No. He actively avoided the cities and seemed to hate them. So why does he ask? Because he loves his nephew Lot and Lot's family. He asks because he wants to be sure that the God he trusts is actually just and fair, and he's worried about somebody he loves. Is that not how often our prayer is? We ask for something we think we want. What we say is not what we really want. We want something similar, related. Maybe we're afraid to ask directly. Maybe we don't really know what we want. But by asking whatever we can, by persisting, that desire is purified and clarified. And if it's good, it's answered, granted by God. Lot is saved, even though Sodom and Gomorrah are not. Abraham gets his actual desire, his real prayer, answered. Abraham grows in his love of others by this practice. And it proves several things about God. That God really does want what is best. That he knows better than we what that is, what we truly desire. And that persevering in prayer helps us to get to that point. And it also shows that he is just. Lot is saved. He does not condemn the just, despite the sins of the city that he lives in. But Lot's wife, if you remember the story, is not. Abraham's prayer helped to save her, to give her the chance to leave the city, but then she turned back to her sin and died for it, because God's justice is not mocked. His love is also truth. It is also justice. What is the point that we're being told? Pray. Pray constantly. Be shamelessly persistent, even annoying God by how much we ask. Yet do so with humility, knowing that God is using your prayer to change you, not himself. Lift your desires to God, but be open to letting those desires fade or grow, mature or change according to his design. It's fine if you are like the toddler throwing a fit, so long as you remember that God is the Father who knows best. And maybe you get tired of asking for things that you don't get. So try asking for things you know you will get. The Holy Spirit. Because ultimately, that's what we truly desire. The joy that only God can bring. And he grants us the Holy Spirit indirectly through all the ways in which he answers and doesn't answer prayer. So long as we continue to pray, we bring those desires to him, he will always use that to bring us to greater holiness and ultimately greater joy. Every prayer, every desire, answered or not, will bear fruit so long as we keep bringing it to him.